do we really have free will? I think that this is a super interesting topic to tackle here and discuss, because as you develop yourself spiritually, as you become a little bit more conscious, as you start to develop yourself in that way, eventually what comes up is the topic of free will. And am I really in control? And I think that this is super valuable to talk about and have a deeper understanding of, because when it comes to the whole topic of free will, it's like, well, who is really in control? Is it me? Is it my ego? Do I have control as a conscious creator? Is my ego unconsciously controlling me? And so I'm going to be discussing my perspective and if we really have free will. So if you're new to this channel, I want you to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, because I post a new video every single day. Also, if you wanted to work with me one-on-one and become a private client, then consider applying for a free consultation by hitting the website that's in the description box of this video. So free will, I think the first thing to discuss when it comes to free will, and if we really have it, is how conscious are you? How conscious are you? How aware are you of your thought patterns and the patterns that control you based on the survival instincts, based on the ego? Because what happens is that, as you awaken spiritually, if you want to label it with that word, is that you start to awaken to the fact that you're not actually your ego. And so what happened to me is that I started to become conscious of the fact that, I am not my ego, right? I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my emotions. I'm not a feeling in my body. And so I started to become conscious of these, autopilot responses that were playing out in my life without me realizing it. And so to any person that goes through this process, they look back at their whole life and they're like, oh my God, I had these patterns that were playing out. And maybe you got these patterns from school, maybe from your family. Like I know for me, I had a lot of reactive patterns, getting angry at simple things within my family. Simple things like socks being on the floor or, whatever it may be, just like reacting to external phenomena. And what you'll experience is that, as you awaken a little bit, you'll start to see, well, wait a second, before there was these unconscious patterns controlling me, right? And so I was kind of living on autopilot until I became conscious of the fact that I was living on autopilot. Because, this whole topic of consciousness versus unconsciousness, it's like you don't know that you're unconscious until you become conscious of the fact that you're unconscious, right? Only when you become conscious of the fact that you're unconscious, you're not unconscious anymore. So when you become conscious of the fact that you're unconscious, now you're a little bit more in control. But then the question is, who was in control before that awakening? Was it you? Were you in control? Or was it the unconscious identification with the past and then the conditioning controlling you, right? Maybe you have a conditioned pattern where, you're a shy person because you built up this identity being a shy person. That's what it was for me for a long time. And now all your decisions are grounded in a conditioning of being a shy person, which is totally unconscious. Totally unconscious. So it's like, who is really controlling you there? Is that you controlling your life? Or is that the conditioning of your childhood controlling you, controlling your decisions? When you unconsciously react, like let's say your mom yells at you, that's what happened to me sometimes when I was a kid. I would get yelled at, and then I would actually respond in the same way that my mom was responding to me. So it's like, who is really in control there? Is it like let's be honest here. That's a pattern, right? She has a pattern, right? And this is just not my family. This is how life works. We absorb these patterns, and then we kind of play out these patterns until we become conscious of them and realize, oh, okay, well, that's just a pattern, right? That's just a pattern in my mind. That's not actually me to some degree, because, when you awaken, you realize, oh, I can't identify with this part of this pattern. Right? This pattern is just unconsciously playing out. I can't identify with this. When you become conscious of that, it's like, who is really in control? Is it me? Or is it the unconscious reactivity? Because when you're running off your ego, you're pretty much running on autopilot. There's no, like, you're not really in control. Your autopilot responses are controlling you. So it's super, super critical to understand, what level of consciousness are you at if we're going to be discussing free will. Like, before we discuss if free will exists, well, I think the first thing to discover is how conscious are you? And you got to contemplate that. How conscious are you? Because if you're super, super unconscious, to some degree, you don't have free will. Like, if you're honest with yourself. I believe that at a higher level, you chose that level of unconsciousness because as an infinite creator, you choose to play the role of being unconscious, right? That's part of infinity. And then so that's, what you're playing out. That's the role you're playing in that incarnation, or in that point in your life at least. Maybe you awaken later, maybe in the next lifetime, if you believe in that kind of stuff. You'll see that in that moment, who is really in control? It's almost like to some degree you're not even in control because you have all these patterns controlling you. But then so what happens when you awaken? Then are you in control? Well, because who knows? Because when you awaken, you also discover that you don't choose what thoughts you have, right? You don't really choose what thoughts you have. If I'm honest with myself, when I'm meditating, I've been meditating every single day for like 4 or 5 years now. I don't really know how long it's been. I just committed to meditating every single day for, a couple years ago, and I stuck with that no matter what. What I discovered is I'm almost receiving my thoughts from who knows where, the collective consciousness, maybe from the higher power, from God, whatever word you want to use. Like, I don't attach to words. I think the words are just pointers to something deeper. That's what I think. And, I don't know where my thoughts come from, if I'm honest with myself. So do I really have free will then? Like right now I'm in the present moment and I'm being present with the camera, right? Looking right into the camera. And so the question is, do I know what I'm going to say next? Right? Like, if I'm honest with myself, do I know exactly what I'm going to say next? What comes through my mind and then I speak that to you? Like, I don't really know. If I'm honest with myself, I don't really know. Like, I don't really know what I'm going to say next to you, which is kind of shocking to think about. It's like, well, wait a second. Okay, I became conscious of my ego. The patterns aren't controlling me anymore. So it's like, okay, now I have free will, right? Well, do I really? Because I don't know what I'm going to say next. I kind of look, a lot of these videos I record, like I have a structure, but I let it come through, and it happens to be the most powerful messages that people resonate with because I kind of let it come through. But it's like, I don't really know what I'm going to say next. So that's also something to consider. But then here's my perspective on this, is that when you awaken to your ego, I believe that now you have more free will, right? So if you have free will, here's how I'll just cut to the chase. I think we have free will. Okay, I think that we have free will, but you have more free will when you're actually conscious of who you are at a deeper level, when you disidentify from the patterns. Because if the patterns are controlling you, then you're not technically really in control, because when you're unconscious, the patterns are making the decision for you. Like, the decision-making process is not something that you consciously do. It's the ego playing out the patterns for you, and then you just kind of go along for the roller coaster ride of whatever the ego decided for you unconsciously based on the conditioning of the past. So my perspective is that as you awaken more spiritually, as you start to develop more consciousness, as you develop more awareness, now this is where free will actually comes into play. And now you're a little bit more in control, because now you become conscious of the fact that you are God and you created all of this. You become conscious of the fact that you are an infinite creator. You become conscious of the fact that you actually created all of this, and that you actually have the conscious ability to create whatever it is that you want. You have the free will choice to pretty much do whatever it is that you want with your life. The question is, are you actually conscious of that? Are you conscious of the fact that you have the free will choice to control your life? You can become conscious of that. And so what I'm saying is that unless you become conscious of that, you don't actually have free will to some degree, because you're not conscious of the fact that you're a conscious creator and you're unconsciously creating your reality, right? Like, you're always creating your reality. You're pretty much always creating your reality. Like, your reality is being created, whether consciously or unconsciously, right? But then the question is, can you consciously create your reality? And now you can choose what it is that you actually want for your life. Because a lot of people, they don't actually consciously create their realities. They go on autopilot. Their egos are making decisions for them. And this can really block you from living the most powerful life. Because if you want to live the most powerful life, if you really want to step into your true power, then you got to become conscious of, your ego. It's really the only way, because most people are just going with the flow. And like, I love that term, go with the flow, but like, what does that really mean? I don't think going with the flow means continue on with the unconscious patterns of your family. That's not going with the flow. Here's my perspective. Become conscious of your ego, then become a conscious creator of your reality, where now you have more free will, right? And so it's interesting because, well, even when you become a conscious creator of your reality, there's still some ego within you. So it's like, do we really have free will? Well, maybe we don't have full free will. There's some things that we don't have full control over, because maybe at a higher level, you chose to reincarnate to fulfill certain things in your life. But then even within that, you still have free will. So it's like, it's really both. You have free will. Also, maybe there's some things that have to play out in a certain way and you don't actually have free will. But the point is that as you become more conscious, you definitely have more input with the kind of life that you want to create. Like, if we're talking practicality here, not just philosophy, and it's like, oh, well, who is really in control? Do we, how about we make this practical? Practically speaking, if you raise your level of consciousness, now you have more input to the life that you want to create and how it actually turns out. But until you get to that point, practically speaking, who is really making decisions in your life? Because when I had to make a decision of dropping out of school a couple months back, I knew that I had to become present to the moment and choose my life path based on presence. Because if I chose staying in school, doing something that I hated, that was based on my ego, based on the unconscious conditioning of the past, well then, am I making that decision? Me as consciousness? Or is my ego making that decision? Right? You want to be making decisions from your heart space, from your intuition, from presence. Because when you have a distinction between your heart and consciousness and presence and love and truth versus ego, darkness, unconsciousness, devilry, that's one I got from actualize.org. Unconsciousness, the unconscious ego part of you. What you'll experience is that you can actually make better decisions. And so this is where it becomes very practical, because I don't want to stand here and talk about philosophy for 20 minutes and waste your time. Okay, if we have free will, now that you understand, okay, I like all of the patterns, I have free will now, how do we make this practical? It's about understanding that the more you become conscious of the fact that you are consciousness and not your ego, you now have more free will to create the life that you really want. And so most people don't know that they're conscious creators. You're a conscious creator. You're such a conscious, infinite creator that you had the opportunity to convince yourself that you're not an infinite creator, which is part of infinity. Because part of infinity means that you also had the choice to convince yourself that you were not infinity and that you're not a conscious creator, and you can actually be an unconscious creator. There's nothing wrong with that at the universal level. At the big picture level, there's nothing wrong with that, because you have your soul's journey. Your journey is to play out those patterns and live that life, and then maybe become conscious of it in this lifetime and awaken to that, or maybe awaken to that in the next lifetime if you believe in that. Well, Whenever you awaken to that is whenever that happens. But before that happens, you're not really in control. The consciousness of, the unconsciousness is in control of your life. It's pretty sad, but at the big picture level, it's not, because that's how it has to be. And that's the duality that we live in. There's this dualistic nature of life, where part of that is experiencing the highs and lows, and also experiencing the contrast of being fully awake and being fully asleep, being unconscious. And so here's the thing though, once again, when you become conscious of the fact that you're unconscious, it's like, whoa, I was unconscious a second ago. Now you're not unconscious anymore, because unconsciousness implies a lack of consciousness, unconsciousness. So here's the thing. The interesting thing about unconsciousness that always blew my mind since I was a little kid, I've always had thought about these things when I was a little kid. It's like, when you're unconscious, you don't know that you're unconscious. You don't know. You don't know that you're unconscious. So it's like, when somebody is ignorant, not only do you not know, you don't know that you don't know. So it's like, how crazy is that? How crazy is that when you're unconscious, you don't know that you're unconscious? So it's like, once again, who is really controlling you in that moment? Who is really controlling you? Because you don't know that you're unconscious. You're just kind of like, herpty-derp. You're going through life, you're like herpty-derp, and you're just going with the flow, but like, you're not really conscious of what you're doing. You're just kind of like going with it. You're just like reacting, maybe getting angry. It's literally autopilot. So it's like, who is really controlling you? So I think it's super, super practical to understand, hey, I can become conscious of the fact that I'm unconscious. And then here's the awakening that I had. It's like, okay, when you start to like, here's how I'll end this video. When you shift back and forth between consciousness and unconsciousness, which is how the journey starts, you become present, and then you get lost in a daydream for like a couple minutes, for a couple days, and then you snap out of the daydream, and you're like, whoa, what was that all about? Like, when you're meditating, you can be lost in your thoughts for like 5 minutes, and then you become conscious of that, and you're like, whoa, what was that all about? And then you become conscious of that, right? And then you become conscious of the fact that you were lost for 5 minutes. And then when you connect that back to your daily life, it's like, whoa, is that how I live my life? Do I live my life being lost in a daydream of thoughts, not realizing it? And then you come to the conclusion, like, yes, that's exactly how most people live their life. Most people live their life unconsciously lost in a daydream. And that unconscious daydream is controlling their life. And then until you become conscious of this daydreaming, unconscious autopilot response, you're not really in control of your reality as much as you could be. So to conclude this video, like, do we really have free will? I don't know. I have an intuitive feeling that we came here on this planet to do certain things, and that to some degree, some things are predestined. But then also you have free will within this realm of consciousness, and you can develop more of it as you become more conscious. That's how I see it. Is that you develop more free will as you become more conscious. But then until that point, you're not really that conscious of it. You don't technically have free will. You have the bigger free will where you chose at a higher level to be unconscious, but in that moment, you're unconscious. So you're playing out some patterns from past conditioning. So that's pretty much all I have for you. So once again, to make this practical, I would recommend that you do meditation. You observe something that I call self-observation. Observe yourself, not just in meditation, but in daily life. Observe the reactions that you have. Observe how we, like it's survival, right? Not just on the physical level, but on the mental level, we survive. We like to keep our identities alive. And so let's say somebody threatens your ego, and the only way you see it as a threat is if you're attached to your sense of self. When you feel this threat, it's like, okay, you get mad, and then you react. You start reacting unconsciously, right? And then it's like, okay, well, you notice that, and then you're like, whoa, that's kind of weird how it's almost like autopilot. Observe that. Observe that. Observe that, because when you start to observe that, what you notice is that you're not actually as in control as you thought, right? You're not actually, like maybe we're not in control as much as we think. even when you're conscious. But the point is that when you become conscious, you definitely have more control. That's confirmed. Okay, that's confirmed. So develop your consciousness, become more aware, and you'll have more control to be a conscious creator of your reality and actually making decisions that you truly want to be making, that are not based on the conditioning of the past. The decisions that you choose to make because you are an infinite conscious creator that can choose the reality that it wants, not an unconscious autopilot ego making decisions out of fear that come from a foundation of the conditioning that happened in the past. So that's all I have for you today. I want you to check out my free guided meditation that connects you deeply to the present moment and helps you to develop a sense of peace and aliveness by just simply connecting to the moment. It's totally free. Just hit the link that's in the description box of this video, and I'll also leave it as a comment in this video. That's all I have for you today. Have yourself a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.